When we feel anxious about a certain upcoming situation or event, we have the tendency to paint monumental pictures in our mind about how bad all of this is going to be. Let's say you have an upcoming presentation, a speech, an important meeting, or a job interview. Most people, something around 85% of people, experience their heart beating faster just by the thought of it. The mind goes a million miles a second, that blockbuster movie in the head about how they are going to stumble over their words, if they even manage to say anything at all, runs in 3D and high speed. The stress and those feelings of anxiety can get out of control. They run the same scenario over and over and over again. How they fail, how they will look ridiculous, how everybody is going to think they are stupid and incompetent. Horrific, isn't it? If you can relate, keep watching. I'm Christine Philipp. I'm a hypnotist and mind coach, helping people to let go of anxiety so that they can fall in love with life again with more ease and confidence. You might have already situations in your mind where you catch yourself going dark in your thoughts, and maybe even to the point you do not seem to see any way out of this at all. We all, my guess, have those thoughts from time to time. Our mind is sent out creating an assessment of the upcoming situation to find out whether we can deal with it and how. If the worst case would happen, what could be plan B? Are we safe? This is normal. It is how we tick when we face uncertainty. We are designed to expect the worst in order to be prepared. Our ancestors needed to be on guard constantly because every bush could hide a deadly secret which we needed to be prepared for. It could be a harmless rabbit behind the bush, or it could be a tiger. If we imagine it will be a harmless rabbit and we get it wrong, we would have been doomed. Hence, we are better safe than sorry. Now, this specific scenario is rather unlikely to happen in our day-to-day lives. But we kept that part of our brain that wants to keep us safe at all times. Luckily so. We might have had bad experiences in the past, or have learned some other way that a certain event or situation can be dangerous and uncomfortable for us. And we want to find ways to prevent that from happening in the future. And that is how our mind is trying to help us out. Doesn't feel really comfy though, does it? We are traveling through time to an unknown future and stop right at the peak of the catastrophe. We never see beyond that moment of our failure. Try that. Think of something that would normally induce quite some anxiety in you and create that movie in your head. Do you actually see yourself after the fact, past that moment of horror? That moment when you raise a glass of champagne, for example, when you feel relieved. That part of the blockbuster movie where you live happily ever after. The part where you got the job. The part where you passed the test. I assume not. When you find yourself in the future, being eaten by fear of some upcoming event and catching yourself playing out those worst case scenarios, there's a lot you can do to get yourself back into reality. Let me give you 3 tips on how to handle your personal nightmare stories before you freak out. Number 1. Let's say your best friend throws his or her worst case scenario onto you. They tell you everything about how a particular situation in the future will turn out bad for them, how they will fail, lose, how the world is going to end. What would you tell them if you really cared about them? You wouldn't just say, "It will be okay, you will be fine," because, well, you don't know. And your best friend will tell you that you have no clue, and they will be right. you probably would put a little bit more effort into helping them out. And we all know that it seems to be easier to give advice to others than to ourselves. So when your friend is in a pretty unpleasant state and feels anxious, what would you advise? This would probably be good advice that you could utilize for yourself as well. You have taken yourself out of your own story by then, found a bit of more distance, and hence a clearer mind to give better advice than you would if your mind would be clouded by fear. Tip number 2. Another way would be to ask yourself, could it be different though? Could it be that I will be successful? And how would being successful look like, feel like, sound like? Get that movie going instead. Remind yourself of all the situations you have survived and mastered, all the exams you have passed, all the presentations you went through unharmed. Create a different story, a more helpful one in your mind. Tip number 3 would be to play that worst case scenario till the very end. To help yourself to move beyond the peak of the horror that you see in your mind, you could ask the question, okay, what's next? My mind went blank, I faint on stage, people laugh at me. What's next? And what happens after that? And then after that? And keep going and going. What's next? Your mind goes along with you and will begin to create stories of how you will come out of that situation and keep living your life. Knowing that the end is not what you have imagined, and there are other moments after that specific moment. And that will help to find you more ease. It will help you to find more ease. And maybe you find out in the end, well, after all, it wasn't even that bad. And you found ways to cope. Knowing this, knowing you are able to cope will give you the confidence you need. And you regain the feeling of being in control. So I hope this was useful for you. And if it was, give the video a like. If you want to stay updated on my videos, subscribe to the channel, hitting that bell. We speak soon. Have a lovely day. Bye for now.